Hello students, welcome to our YouTube channel. I am Shibadrita Ghosh and today we will be solving CAT previous year questions. So our first topic is logical reasoning and our subtopic is sitting arrangement. So without wasting any more time, let's move to the questions. The schematic diagram below shows 12 rectangular houses in a housing complex. House numbers are mentioned in the rectangles representing the houses. The houses are located in 6 columns, column A through column F, and 2 rows, row 1 and row 2. The houses are divided into 2 blocks, block XX and block YY. The diagram also shows 2 roads, one passing in front of the houses in row 2 and another between the 2 blocks. Some of the houses are occupied, the remaining ones are vacant and are the only ones available for sale. The road adjacency value of a house is the number of its sides adjacent to a road. For example, the road adjacency value of C2, F2 and B1 are 2, 1 and 0 respectively. The neighbor count of a house is the number of sides of that house adjacent to occupied houses in the same block. For example, E1 and C1 can have the maximum possible neighbor counts of 3 and 2 respectively. The base price of a vacant house is rupees 10 lakhs if the house does not have a parking space and rupees 12 lakhs if it does. The quoted price in lakhs of rupees of a vacant house is calculated as base price plus 5 into road adjacency value plus 3 into neighbor count. The following information is also known. The maximum quoted price of a house in block XX is rupees 24 lakhs. The minimum quoted price of a house in block YY is rupees 15 lakhs and one such house is in column E. Row 1 has 2 occupied houses, one in each block. Both houses in column E are vacant. Each of column D and column F has at least one occupied house. There is only one house with parking space in block YY. So now let's move to the solution. In block XX, the ones which I have shaded you can see are the occupied houses, and in block YY also the ones I have shaded are occupied houses and which I have not shaded is the vacant houses, and that will be the final answer which I am now going to explain. See, it was written that the maximum price in block XX of any house is 24 lakhs. So we have to find a house which is 24 lakhs, whose price is 24 lakhs. Now, what can be the combinations? The base price can be 10 or 12 depending on the fact that it has parking space or not. Then we can have road adjacency as 0, 1 or 2, not 3, because if we have 10 or 12 plus 5 into 3 will be 15, which will exceed 24. Plus we can have the neighbor count as 0, 1, 2 or 3, because the maximum neighbor count you can see, let us assume for B1 or B2 is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So the maximum neighbor count is 3, 2, 1 or 0. So now we have to find that which is the combination for which 24 lakhs is the highest price. First of all, we will take the base price as 10. Why? Because it was written that parking space is there only in block YY. There is no parking space in block XX. So the base price will be 10 lakhs only. We will take the road adjacency as 1. That is 5 into 1, 5. And we will take the neighbor count as 3, which is 3 into 3, 9. You can take any other road adjacency or neighbor count values to find more combinations, but you will still find that this is the only combination which is possible to get 24. You can try these other ways to find out combinations, but finally you will find that this is the only combination. So now we have to see that this combination 10 plus 5 plus 3 into 3, that is 9, is satisfied by which house in block XX. So if we observe carefully, we will see that the neighbor count 3 is only of house B2 or B1, and road adjacency value 1 is only for B2 because B1 has no road beside it, only neighbor count is 3. But for B2, there's one road adjacent to it and 3 neighbors. This and this. B1, A2 and C2. Now we also know that for neighbors, if it is occupied, then only it can form neighbors. So in B2 we can see that there is one road which is in front of it, adjacent to it, and there are 3 neighbors, A2, B1 and C2. Since these are the only three neighbors of B2, we can conclude from this that A2, B1 and C2 are occupied since they are the neighbors of B2. Now it is said that in row 1, there is only one occupied house in each of block XX and YY. For YY we will see later, but for XX we have already found the occupied house. So it is very obvious that the other two houses will be vacant. That is A1 and C1 are vacant. And B2 we have found is already vacant. That's why it's for sale and we have a price for it. So the vacant houses in block XX are A1, C1 and B2, and the occupied houses are B1, A2 and C2. Now we will move to block YY. So in block YY we have been given that the minimum price is 15 lakhs and it is also given that that price is of either E2 house or E1 house. So let us take two cases. If it's for E2 house or it's for E1 house. First of all, let's compute the prices. 10 or 12, that is if it is a parking space or not, depending on that 10 or 12, because we have been given that in block YY there is a parking space. Plus 5, because for E2 there is an adjacent road, 5 into 1, plus 3 into 0, 1 or 2, because for E2 there can be only 2 neighbors maximum, D2 and F2, and 0 neighbors minimum, because E1 is vacant, it is already given. Now for E1 it's similar 10 or 12 depending on it has parking space or not, plus 0 because there is no road adjacent to E1, plus 3 into 0, 1 or 2. Now let's take the cases. Case 1 is if D1 is vacant and F1 is vacant. D1 and F1 is vacant. This is not possible because it was given that in row 1, at least one house has to be occupied in both block XX and block YY. So if D1 and F1 are vacant, E1 is already vacant, so there are no houses which is occupied in row 1 in block YY. So this case is invalid. Now let's go to case number 2. D2 is vacant and F2 is vacant. If D2 and F2 are vacant, then D1 and F1 has to be occupied because it was also given that in row D and row F, at least one house has to be occupied. So D1 and F1 has to be both occupied, but both can't be occupied because in row 1, there can be only one house which can be occupied. So this case is also invalid. Now in case 3, D1 is vacant, F2 is vacant or occupied. For E2, 10 or 12 plus 5 for road plus 3 into 1 or 2 depending on F2 is vacant or occupied. Like D1 is vacant, then D2 is occupied, F2 is vacant, then there is one neighbor, then plus 3. If F2 is occupied, then 2 neighbor plus 6. Then it can be 18 or 20 plus 3, then 21 or 23. But E2 is not satisfying the condition that minimum price is 15 lakhs. So let's move to E1. E1 is 10 or 12 plus 0 because no road adjacent to it, plus 3 because D1 is vacant, F2 is vacant or occupied, and F1 is occupied. So 10 or 12 plus 0 plus 3 for F1. So it will be 13 or 15. It can't be 13 because it is written that the minimum price has to be 15. So it will be 15. So we see that in case 3, E1 is having the minimum price of 15 lakhs. Now let's explore the case 4. In case 4, F1 is vacant and D2 is vacant. So the price of E2, F1 is vacant, D2 is vacant, price of E2. So F2 is occupied and E1 is anyways vacant. So E2 we know is not having the parking space because in E1 we saw since 13 is not valid, 15 is valid. For 15, this has to be 12. That is, E1 is having the parking space. If E1 is having the parking space in whole block YY, there can be only one house which is having the parking space. So if E1 is having the parking space, then E2 is definitely not having the parking space. So in case 4, we have to take this as only 10 and not 12. Plus 3 for F1 because F1 is occupied. So F1 is vacant and D2 is vacant and F2 is occupied. So this 3 is for F2, neighbor F2 of E2. So for E2, it's 13, which is not possible. That's why case 4 is also a wrong case, an invalid case. So we can see only case 3 is the correct case, and in that also only E1 is having the parking space and E1 is having the minimum price of 15 lakhs. So now we can see from this case that D1 has to be vacant, F2 can be vacant or occupied. It doesn't make any difference. Since D1 is vacant and 1 has to be occupied in the row D, D2 will be occupied. And F1 will also be occupied. E1 and E2 are vacant and among them E1 is having the parking space. So finally we have the vacant and occupied houses in the block YY, that is D1, E2, E1 and F2 are vacant. F2 may be vacant. I am considering a case where F2 is vacant. And D2, F1 and F2 is occupied, and I am considering a case where F2 is occupied, then D2, F1 and F2 are occupied. Actually for F2 there is a discrepancy that if it is occupied or vacant, because it doesn't matter in this question. That's why while doing the MCQ questions you will find in some options that there is either this or this. That option is there because in one case we'll consider F2 is occupied and other case we'll consider F2 is vacant. Now, and the parking space is present in E1 house. So both block XX and YY are now covered. So now we can move to the MCQ questions. So the first MCQ question says, how many houses are vacant in block XX? Actually, this is not an MCQ question. This is a numerical question where you have to type the answer. So let's move to the solution. In block XX, the vacant houses are A1, C1, B2. So there are 3 houses which are vacant in block XX. Next question we have, which of the following houses is definitely occupied? Option 1 is D2. D2 we can say it's occupied, definitely occupied. Next option is F2. F2 we know we had a discrepancy that it may be vacant or it may be occupied, so it's definitely not occupied. That's why F2 is not the option. Next, B1, yes, B1 is also definitely occupied. And finally, A1 is vacant. So we can see there are 2 answers of this question, B2 and B1. Next question we have, which of the following option best describes the number of vacant houses in row 2? In row 2, we have vacant houses B2, E2 and F2 may be occupied or may be vacant. If it's occupied, then there are 2 vacant houses, and if it's vacant, then there are 3 vacant houses. That's why the option can be either 2 or 3. So option D is the answer. Next, what is the maximum possible quoted price in lakhs of rupees for a vacant house in column E? Let's compute the maximum prices for E1 and E2. For E1, we have D1 is vacant, E2 is vacant, and F1 is occupied. So for E1, there is only one neighbor and there is no road. Then the price will be 12, since E1 has a parking space we know, plus 5 into 0 plus 3 into 1 for F1 equals to 12 plus 3 equals to 15. This can be one answer if it is referring to this diagram which we have made, but they have said that what is the maximum possible price. In that case, if they are considering like this, that all these are occupied. Actually, the maximum case can occur only when all the three are occupied. So this can also be a case. It depends on what the question setters are considering. If these three are occupied, then the price of E1 will be 12 plus 5 into 0 plus 3 into 3, which is 21. This is the maximum possible price if they are not considering this diagram and considering all the houses as occupied houses other than E1. Now let's go to E2 in the similar way. For E2, if they are considering this diagram, then 10, because there is no parking space, this is vacant, this is occupied, this is vacant, occupied, this may or may not be occupied. For this, we will consider this is occupied so that we can maximize the price. 5 into 1, because there is a road here, plus 3 into 2. That is 15 plus 6, 21. But if we don't consider this diagram and try to maximize the price, then we will consider E2 equals to 12. We will consider that the parking space is in E2 plus 5 into 1 for the road plus 3 into 3 for the 3 neighbors. That is 26. So, the maximum price for E1 can be 21 and the maximum price for E2 can be 26. Next we have, which house in block YY has a parking space? We can see that in block YY, E1 is having the parking space. So the answer is option C. I hope this was understandable. Thank you.
So students, we hope this video was helpful. If you have any doubts, the comment section welcomes you. If you want to know more about our community, do check out our website. Link is in the description below. Do not forget to like, share, subscribe and hit the bell icon for more updates. Thank you.